To beat Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, usually you have to play through all 8 chapters, while acquiring new partners, paper curses, upgrades, all 7 crystal stars, and meeting a whole host of colorful characters along the way. Taking a look at the leaderboard for TTYD 80%, speedrunners are able to finish the game in less than 2.5 hours. So, just how are speedrunners able to beat the game in such a short time? Glitchless speedruns of TTYD are around 6 hours, and besides a few tricks, all you can do to try to go fast is avoid encounters, tighten up your movement, and don't die. But 80% speedruns, we are allowed to use any game-breaking glitch we want. The first thing I want to mention is that we will be talking about the Japanese version of TTYD. While the US version is actually capable of being faster than the Japanese one, it's essentially harder than the Japanese version. So most runners choose JP. Additionally, the top 2 times on the leaderboard do use a slightly different route. While most runners use the easier Yoshi route, more aggressive runners use the more difficult Goombella route, which can be a couple minutes faster. The only significant difference is that Goombella is used to deal with boss fights instead of Yoshi, and it skips going to the Pianta parlor. Since most people use it, I'll be talking about the Yoshi route. Timing starts upon selecting yes after naming a new save file. We mash through some cutscenes until we get to the tutorial battle with Crump. Goombella joins the party, we break Zesty's contact lens, then we order her a new one and get some items that are going to be very helpful for the early and mid game. After we get robbed, we talk to Frankly, skip the action command tutorial, and go down the pipe and fight the Goomba Trio. One of the most useful items in the entire run is the Fright Mask. This item will make enemies flee from battle. If all the enemies flee, you'll only get the default single star point that you get at a minimum for any battle. Fright Masks won't always work though, depending on the enemy, but thankfully it has a 100% chance of working on the Goomba Trio. After avoiding some encounters, we're going to get plane mode. Instead of going to the pedestal like you normally would, we're going to backtrack to the room where you fight Blooper to do a trick called Blooper Skip. By jumping on the first frame that we enter the room and jumping again frame perfectly as soon as we touch the ground, we can make it to the boat panel and fall in the water. The game will spawn us at 0-0, which happens to be just far enough right to land us on the platform with the pipe to Chapter 1. Although the pipe is not visible right now, it does still exist. This glitch is called Hazard Respawn Glitch, or HRG. And it happens because the game needs at least 2 frames to properly update Mario's hazard respawn coordinates. The game doesn't attempt to update Mario's hazard respawn value once he makes it onto objects such as this boat panel. TTYD runs at 60 FPS, so you only have 1/60th of a second anytime you need to hit a frame-perfect input. As a side effect of Blooper Skip, Professor Frankly gets to hang out with us for a little longer than usual. There's another HRG we can do in Petal Meadows to skip the bridge. For some reason in this room, your hazard respawn value doesn't start updating until you cross roughly this line, so we can just do 1 frame-perfect jump, land on this candy cane, which won't update our hazard respawn value since it's an object, and then jump in to get spawned on top of the water. From here, it's just 1 more frame-perfect input as Mario stands up to jump off the water and make it across. Jumping off the surface of the water is actually impossible on PAL, which makes it an inferior version of the game. Once we make it to Petalburg, we're going to talk to Mayor Kroop, this weird turtle, and then head to Schwank Fortress to collect the Sun and Moon Stones. Koops joins our party, and we head to Hooktail Castle. We get our first level up of the run after defeating Red Bones, and we level up badge points. It's important we do not upgrade flower points, and you'll see why later. It's here where we collect the last curse we will be getting in the run, Paper Mode. We equip Attack FXR and Power Bounce to deal with Hooktail quickly, using Koops' turns to refresh our FP with honey syrups when necessary. A good 80% run finishes Chapter 1 around 34 minutes in. After the Peach and Bowser intermissions, we go to the Thousand-Year Door and stand on the pedestal. We talk to Punio to open the entrance to Chapter 2, but here's where things finally get interesting. Instead of going to Chapter 2 to fight the Shadow Sirens, and Magnus von Grapple to save the Punies, and the Great Tree, we're gonna leave Punio to die. We head back up to Central Rogueport, buy a few more Fright Masks, and give the contact lens to Zesty. Now it's finally time to talk about the biggest sequence break of the run, Teleporter Room Early, or TRE. To understand TRE, we first have to talk about parallel universes. Just kidding.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
But talking about unspin jumps would be helpful. By releasing R and jumping on the exact same frame, Mario does an unspin jump, where Mario can instantly move at full speed, while he's still unspinning from Paper Mode. Not only does this look very cool, Mario's hitbox is still smaller than usual for a period of time. By walking against the door at a perfect angle of -358, or just 2 angles to the left of directly up, and unspin jumping within a couple frames as Mario passes the crack, Mario's hitbox is just small enough and he has just enough speed to clip through. From there, you can just press the switch and then take the teleporter to Chapter 7 less than 50 minutes into the run. And if you're wondering why I was walking against the fence earlier, that's to reset my neutral angle. You can hold a perfect angle of 178 and hold X, Y, and start for a few seconds to reset your neutral angle to minus 358. This makes it to where you only have to focus on timing the unspin jump. This trick is incredibly difficult and precise. However, it doesn't stop speedrunners from accessing Chapter 7 early. Well, I guess except for when it kills runs. Although we are on the moon, we are not in a Chapter 7 sequence. To fix that, we can go to this room and read this red note, which, for some reason, updates our sequence to Chapter 7. We get a few card keys and leave the moon for now. By setting up Koops on the right wall of the teleporter room and using him a few frames before we open the door, Mario gets what's called jump storage, where the game basically thinks we're jumping even though we aren't. So if we initiate a jump, Mario will gain height infinitely, which speedrunners call super jumping. But the game knows we are on solid ground if our y-axis velocity is 0 or less, and Mario won't be able to jump. If we try to jump, Mario won't be able to leave the ground and we will lose jump storage. In order to super jump, we have to increase Mario's y velocity by walking up a step. We get Koops caught on the side of the room because if he's too close to Mario, we'll simply open the door and use Koops at the same time, which looks funny, but does not give us jump storage. After getting jump storage, all you have to do is walk up a step and press and hold the A button to gain infinite height. Here we use it to land on top of the Ultra Hammer chest. From up here we can just jump off and open the chest as we fall in front of it. The Ultra Hammer will be very useful for a glitch later on. It should be noted that the Ultra Hammer is actually not connected to sequence, so this doesn't change the fact that we're in a Chapter 7 state right now. We need double dip, but we don't have boat mode. In order to get around that, we do a trick called spin delay off this piece of collision in front of Frankly's house. This trick unloads a lot of collision in the room, allowing us to just walk straight to the chest and grab double dip. We're also going to go to the Trouble Center and take on Frankie's trouble. Next we make our way into the Great Tree to this room where the 10 Jabby fight usually takes place, to do a trick called Jabby Hive Skip. But wait, why didn't we just go to Chapter 2 earlier when we opened up the entrance? By triggering a post-Chapter 2 state, we skipped tons of cutscenes, the Shadow Sirens fight, and even obtaining Flurry, letting us just waltz right in to grab the only thing we need, Super Boots. But back to Jabby Hive Skip. By using Goombella, then pressing a direction 4 frames later, we can move and use Goombella at the same time. These are called Goombella buffers. With a few Goombella buffers, we can move into this loading zone, since we can't take a loading zone while using Goombella. Once we're past the trigger, we walk up against the top wall in paper mode, release the control stick, and then very quickly as we start to unspin, start jumping, and open the partner menu with the D-pad at the same time, and then close it very quickly with the A button again, and start holding up. And since the game will not push Mario out of walls during the pause menu, he clips straight through the wall. From here, we can simply maneuver around the seam and make it to the Super Boots. Super Boots actually will update our sequence, putting us in a Chapter 2 state. Where are we going next? Well, if you guessed Chapter 3, you'd be wrong. Well, you would also be kinda right. But for now, we are going to Chapter 6. We can break these blocks and then spin jump on this switch to open the pipe to Poshley Heights. Reading this note will put us in a late Chapter 6 state. Let me go take a detour to save, head all the way back to the teleporter room to get jump storage off the door with Koops, and intentionally game over to one of the enemies in the sewers. Jump storage actually persists through a game over and can even be transferred between different save files. So we can reload our save file in Poshley Heights, walk to the Sanctum, super jump to hit the switch, and grab the Garnet Star to complete Chapter 6. After some more Peach and Bowser intermissions, the game will spawn us here, in front of the train in Rogueport. Now it's time to do another major sequence break in the run, Blimp Ticket Skip, or BTS. By getting into a very precise position in front of this crack, and then holding straight up, if we unspin jump, Mario can clip through the train. There's an email trigger right here, and we need to get jump storage from that email. Just like with Goombella, we are able to move for a few frames after using Koops, which is called a Koops buffer. By doing a Koops buffer into the email trigger, we can get jump storage. We set up against the top wall so we can shoot Koops and use him again as soon as he hits the wall. We have to set him up over here to the left because if he's too close to Mario, we'll just trigger the email and use Koops at the same time. It's important you make sure to wait long enough so that Koops actually hits the wall, or else you'll just trigger the email without getting jump storage. From here we can get positive Y velocity off the rail and jump all the way over the invisible wall to the pipe that takes us to the Blimp to Chapter 3. While BTS is one of the easier tricks in the run, It can be pretty tough to learn since you have to do so much movement without being able to see Mario. So to recap, we beat Chapter 1, and then we opened the entrance to Chapter 2, went to Chapter 7, then went back to Chapter 2 to get Super Boots, then finished Chapter 6, just so the email spawns right here, also we can do a super jump to get to Chapter 3. But why do all that to get to Chapter 3 when you can go straight to Chapter 7? Well, my friends, the answer is this cute little dinosaur. Yes, baby Yoshi has a secret hidden ability that we need to beat the game. Basically, the first half of the run is just designed to get Yoshi as fast as possible. While the fact that he speeds up our movement is nice, it's the fact that he's needed for a glitch later on that makes him so important. After we make it to Chapter 3, we actually go back to Rogueport and then take the Blimp back to Chapter 3, so that the game recognizes we're in a Chapter 7 state. This makes it to where we can kind of just politely slip past the security guard and start taking on the minor league fights without talking to Jolene. Most of the fights, we'll use a fright mask to deal with quickly, hopefully. The gimmick with Chapter 3 is we not only have to win every fight, but also follow the condition that Jolene gives us every fight. These conditions can be good, like win in 5 turns or less, don't switch partners, or win before taking 20 HP of damage. They can also be horrible, like take damage 5 times, don't attack for the first 3 turns, or don't use items on a fight that we want to use items. People are sometimes impressed that runners can understand Japanese conditions, but you just have to memorize 1 character per condition thanks to resources made by the community, and most of them look fairly different. You'd be surprised how quickly you can learn the conditions. A pretty good run will get Yoshi less than an hour and a half in. But once we have our little guy, we're going to buy some point swaps, which will be very useful for final fights, and head back to Rogueport. After selling some badges, we go to the Pianta Parlor and, using the gold card we got for completing Frankie's Trouble, buy some Power Rush Peas. Then it's back to the moon, grab the last card key, get jump storage by using Yoshi right as we're about to catch an item with full inventory, and then enter the factory room. From here we can use a super jump in order to skip using the conveyor belt. Then we just have to take a trip through the background and enter the room to Magna Spawn Grapple 2. It's time to talk about the amazing strategy that is Power Rush stacking and Double Dip. Double Dip is a badge that lets you use 2 items in 1 turn for the cost of 4 FP. Point Swap is an item that swaps either Mario's or his partner's HP with your current FP stat. So we just Double Dip, reducing our FP from 5 to 1, then Point Swap on Yoshi, and we can get him into peril. Activating Mega Rush P, as well as the 5 Power Rush Ps equipped to take our base damage from a measly 1 to 16. This is why it's so important that we don't level up FP. Once we've watched the Bowser intermission and talked to Tech, we can head back to Rogueport and open the 1000-year door. We're going to do a very easy HRG when we get to the fire bar room by simply hovering and holding right on Yoshi and then running into the fire bar to quickly get to the middle of the room. From here we can get into an encounter with the Phantom Ember at just the right time in the fire bar cycle to use invincibility frames to run through the fire bars, hopping over the last one if needed. For Dark Bones, all we need to do is double dip and then use a shooting star or an HP drain on Dark Bones, and then point swap on Koops. Koops can win the fight from there with a power shell. We upgrade our HP to 15 here to help us survive the final fights. At this point you may be wondering how we finish the game from here. We made it to Chapter 8, but we don't have Bobbery to blow up the statues revealing the pipes to the background, which we would normally use to hit the switches, revealing the boat panels to Riddle Tower, and we don't even have boat mode, or Flurry to reveal one of the keys in Riddle Tower, or Ultra Boots to get past the spike room after Riddle Tower. Finally, it's time to talk about the most infamous trick in the game, Palace Skip. But what is Palace Skip and how do we do it? Casually, you would defeat Gloomtail for the star key, then go back to Riddle Tower and complete it. Then place all 8 keys to lower the floor in the final section of the Palace of Shadows. When you lower the floor, certain loading zones become accessible. Our goal with Palace Skip is to reach this loading zone without ever lowering the floor. Because once you get into the loading zone, grabbing the Palace key will update our sequence, and when we leave the room, the floor will be lowered, allowing us to enter the throne room. The first step is going to the room before Gloomtail and killing this Phantom Ember. This guy is probably the most hated enemy in all of TTYD speedrunning. We needed to drop an item for us. Any item. Which is why we got the badge Item Hog earlier in the run. Item Hog will increase our chances of getting an item drop. Without it, the chances of getting an item drop from an enemy are only 2.6%. With Item Hog, that jumps all the way to 20.1%. If the enemy is holding an item, it's normally a chance of 27.6%, but with Item Hog, it goes up to 36.8%. On US PAL versions of the game, Item Hog is actually more effective, giving a chance of around 40% to drop normally, increasing all the way to about 60% if the enemy is holding an item. but unfortunately we're running on JP, so we're going to have to deal with the worst RNG. Thankfully there's a save block in this room, so we can just save and reset if we don't get the item drop, losing about 50 seconds. Once we kill the Ember and it finally drops something, it's time to get something called tech storage. First we have to get the item into the right spot. We need it just near the edge of where the second Phantom Ember can go. Once we have the item placed on the left or right edge of the Ember's zone, we need to do something called neutral jumps in order to prevent Goombella from following Mario over to the item. By being neutral on the control stick while initiating the jump, and then holding a direction towards the item while in the air, letting go of the stick before you land on the ground again, Mario can make it to the item without Goombella following him. From here we can use Goombella a few frames before grabbing the item, which will delay Goombella's text box for an extra frame, resulting in us grabbing the item first. This is called a delayed Goombella buffer. Grabbing an item freezes time, so when we toss the item, time continues and Goombella's text pops up. Although Mario is still unable to move, if we're close enough to the Phantom Ember, it will eventually encounter us, allowing us to run away while keeping the text up. Consistently running away from an encounter in TTYD requires you to mash the A button though, and that would make us close the text box. But by repeatedly pressing Z and A at the same time, we can increase the runaway bar without scrolling text. This is tricky though, and failure can result in you closing the text box, having to do everything again. Once we make it out of the encounter with text storage, we can do something called item conservation. By grabbing the item with Koops and hitting the save block at the same time, we will save the item and it will never disappear unless we grab it and toss it again. This is useful if we mess up in either of the remaining steps and need to get text storage again. Next we need to get Yoshi inside of the wall. To do that, we run to this exact spot in front of the middle of this arch, between the wall and the yellow line on the ground. Then we have to face left and charge an Ultra Hammer spin, but only 2/3 of the way to where Mario spins twice. Now we let the Phantom Ember encounter us, again, and swap to Yoshi, then run away, making sure to scroll to the second text box. The next step, which still somehow isn't the last, I promise we're getting close, is luring the Ember down. When you run away from the fight, Yoshi will be out of bounds inside the wall on the seam. From here, we enter paper mode right after the encounter and then move down to the yellow line, waiting for the Ember to notice us. After this, we just go upright so we're behind the Ember, and when it notices us again, it will go all the way down to the ground. We move left in front of Yoshi, and then release the R button to exit paper mode, and ideally, we open the pause menu exactly 3 frames after Mario begins to unspin. Finally, we can talk about the last step, Yoshi teleport. If we use Yoshi a few frames after closing Goombella's text box, we'll teleport to Yoshi's Y coordinate. Yoshi's Y coordinate should be just right for us to clip into the floor, but still be high enough to first strike this Phantom Ember. We close the text box in the pause menu by pressing A, close the pause menu while continuing to hold A, and press X on this frame. We have to hold A so that we will be hovering after clipping into the floor, so we can hover to the Ember. Since we can't move up or down while riding Yoshi in the air, we need to first strike the Phantom Ember in order to force Mario off of Yoshi. Then, we just hold right of up after the encounter to fall into the loading zone. The Yoshi teleport is usually frame perfect, but if we unspin and then pause on the perfect frame, 3 frames after releasing the R button, Yoshi's Y coordinate will be such that we can use Yoshi on the 4th or 5th frame after closing the text box and still succeed, as long as we lured the Ember down. It is possible to do Palace Skip without this last encounter, which is aptly named Encounterless, but this method can never have a 2-frame window for the Yoshi teleport. It can only ever succeed with frame 4. Additionally, with the RTA setup, it can only work if you paused on the first possible frame after exiting paper mode. With this method, you don't hold A, you just hold slightly right of up, and make sure you don't miss frame 4. This works because there's a frame during the Yoshi hover where Yoshi's above the floor, but Mario is below it. So if we aren't holding A, Yoshi will simply land on the floor, and Mario will fall. So Palace Skip uses a delayed Goombella buffer to get text storage, then charges a spin hammer 2/3 of the way before encountering the Ember to spawn Yoshi inside of the wall. Then we lure the Ember down, force Yoshi to start falling out of bounds, and close the Goombella text box 4 frames before using Yoshi to first strike the Ember while clipping into the floor. Then just run away and fall into the loading zone. This trick sucks. It's not too bad with the 2-frame setup, but the item drop RNG as well as the runaway RNG makes this really rough. Once we make it past Palace Skip, it's just a whole lot of cutscenes and final boss fights. For Grotus, we can just use an attacking item like Shooting Star or Ice Storm to get rid of the Grotus X's, double dipping with a point swap if we need to get Yoshi back into peril, and then a 4x ground pound takes care of Grotus. The JP version of TTYD differs from the US version in that several bosses have attacks that you cannot superguard. One of these is Bowser's Breath, so we kill Cammy with 4 ground pounds and then switch Yoshi out to keep him alive. Thankfully, we can superguard Bowser's Bite if we need to. Bowser will actually seemingly bite over and over if you keep hitting the superguard. A 2x ground pound, followed by a 4x ground pound, is enough to kill Bowser. After this fight, we upgrade our HP to 20. After watching a cutscene with a bunch of weird guys I've never met, we finally start the final boss fight. Shadow Queen can be broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 requires you deal 43 damage to trigger the second phase. On US, you actually have to deal 60 damage to trigger her next phase. The first phase can be dealt with pretty easily by just double dipping a point swap onto Yoshi and then ground pounding 3 times. In the second phase, Shadow Queen is invincible, but as long as we attack her at least once per turn for 3 turns, the battle will end. You just have to be careful to hit guards here and heal if you need to. We watch more cutscenes, then it's on to the final phase. Peach uses the last bit of her strength to totally heal us before the last phase starts, so we can just double dip and use a point swap and a boost sheet on Yoshi to keep him in peril. Then we just have to ground pound 4 times, make sure to guard attacks in case Mario gets targeted too many times, ground pound 4 times again, healing Mario if necessary, and then Yoshi kills by ground pounding 3 more times, or 4 if Shadow Queen stole some HP. And after that, it's just a few more minutes of mashing through cutscenes till timing ends at the circle to black before credits. And that's how speedrunners break the 1,000-year door. While it can be pretty difficult sometimes, it's super rewarding to learn, and the RNG definitely keeps things interesting. If you want to learn to speedrun this game, join the TTYD speedrunning Discord. You can find it on TTYD's speedrun.com page. There are lots of people in there who are super eager to help new runners. Thanks so much if you actually watched this video up to this point. I've got lots of other ideas for videos, like talking about how it's possible to beat the game with 0 crystal stars, and someone actually did it. So if you want to see more, make sure to do the stuff. I also speedrun this game a lot, and if you want to see that, check out my Twitch. It felt weird to release a video about TTYD 1 week before the remake comes out without saying anything about the remake, so I'm really excited about it. Yeah. Bye.